Alright, we're just about ready to get started then. Excellent. This is Dungeons and Dreams, Interview 1. Testing. What? Oh, I don't have to do that. And this might not be. Well, I mean, it's my first interview for this, so to me, it's Interview 1. Whatever. Welcome to a world where reality and unreality meet in a chaotic dance, where comedy and tragedy, chaos and order, violence and blooming life mix in a macabre maelstrom, fit to make the minds of the weak-hearted snap like twigs. Alright, everything's ready? Okay. Dungeons and Dreams, right? Okay. So, I'm supposed to answer your questions, right? Oh, an intro. Well, my name is Daniel. I've been running, RPGs for, I gotta be like 30 years now. Nah, like 28 or something, but yeah, I'm 45. I've been running RPGs for about 28 years. Loads of fun. I've been through a bunch of editions of D&D. I've tried many other games. I've gone for PBTA games, GURPS, Pathfinder, really specific stuff, where you run a theme park or play as a bunch of discarded toys trying to find a new home or something like that. I mean, I guess that's kind of just Toy Story, but no matter what I try to run, people always kind of want to just come back to D&D, which, I mean, I like D&D. I'm a male, a guy. I should have said that right. You never know these days. No, can we cut that out? I shouldn't have said that. That wasn't nice of me. Hark, dear viewer, for... Wait, audio only? Okay. Dear listener, for while this may first appear to be a simple podcast about a game, to you it is no mere game. It is a lifestyle, an experience, a way of being and telling and feeling stories that while many have entered into, few have ever found the strength to leave. Yeah, so I got my start, like I said, around 28 years ago. I think that would have been around 2nd edition. I spent a bit of time as a player, quickly transitioned into being more of a DM when my old group's former DM quit. Larry, he just had more responsibilities, and we were all pretty young back then, but, you still got stuff you need to do, and so I decided I would pick up the slack. I've picked up other games since then, other RPGs, other, just generally tabletop games, board games, that sort of thing. Even some war games every once in a while. Never really could quite get into Warhammer, but I've been around. The thing that always seems to stick, that people always want to play, that I've been running in various game stores, sometimes paid games, sometimes just for fun, just like this one, throughout my life, has been D&D, and now it's even more popular than ever. For, dear listener, when you gaze here into the heart of the enigma that is the human psyche, that enigma in turn gazes, hears back. I lost my train of thought. I can do another take of that, right? Oh, I see. You want everything to be real, off the cuff. Oh, whatever. I guess I vibe with that. My name? And for this, do they really need to refer to me as anything other than Dungeon Master? Alright. Jace Nightshade. Yeah, that's my real name. I'm 22 years old. Look, I really don't see why, gender's gotta come into this. When I am running a game, all I identify as is the Dungeon Master. I'm playing women, I'm playing men, I'm playing all manner of beings, and to sort of limit my role to my out of game gender just seems, well, limiting. Well, I guess I don't want to give the impression that I'm co opting anything or speaking for anyone, so I will say that I don't like to put labels on things, but I consider myself a guy. I use he, they pronouns. I mean, I don't think I'd care too much if someone called me she, but it'd feel a little awkward. Speaking of running games in this shop, mostly paid, that's sort of what this whole shebang is about, yeah? Alright. Well, the name of the store, have you. Okay, you haven't talked about that yet? Okay. It's called GameGate, which, you know, to me seems a little unfortunate, but I feel like it's too late to change it now. Anyway, they've been open about 5 years, owned by a guy named Jason. He's really cool. I've been running games here ever since it opened, and it's been really great, really welcoming to all kinds of people. I was super excited to see that a game store nearby had opened. You used to have to drive out like an hour to even get to one. I mean, I did it because I really enjoy running games for people. I like being able to shop, to see what the store has on offer, especially since I'm getting usually a little bit of store credit at least for running games there. Yeah, so this place is almost like a home away from home for me. I mean, there's not really family here. Well, I guess my players are kind of like my family. I mean, no matter how often I'm available, most of them only drop by around once a month or so, and then when I can't make it to, meet up, I'm the one who's the problem. And they're always asking to, borrow things, whether it's minis or some money for snacks or to help cover the, cost of playing. It's a really actually a lot like some of my family, at least, you know what I mean? The food's obviously not as good as it is at home. Just a, pizza at best. Most of the time I just pick up some chips from behind the counter or something. And at home I have. Well, okay, no, that's kind of the same too. So, yeah, I mean, this place is like a second home, a home away from home for me. Yeah, that should cover the intro for you guys, right? Wow, other systems, how I got started, how I got started at the store too. Alright. Well, I mean, I got my start playing 5e, you know? Started out 7 years ago. Never really ended up playing games, or, well, I mean, I have, but I hadn't played it all before I started. Just saw a couple videos of people running games online and thought I could do way better than those losers. See, I basically inhaled 5e after that and never looked back. It's just a really special thing to be able to take any kind of story you want, any kind of setting you want, any events you want, and just plug them into this system that does pretty much all the work for you, and then, watch your players squirm. I have tried other things on occasion. I've messed around with Vampire, World of Darkness, It's a nice system in some ways, but a lot of what it is comes down to sort of lore and setting information, and it's like I don't think any of it is necessarily better than what I could do, or even darker than what I could do, even though it's called World of Darkness, you know. It's kind of tame sometimes. So yeah, I mostly stick with 5e. I've got a group of about 4 players who've been with me pretty much the whole time since I started out running games. I mean, some of them have threatened to leave before, but you know, I always reel them back in. Then about, let's say 4 years ago, I found out that, Placid opened up here, and I came down and started running games for them. It's been pretty great. I think that works for an intro on my end. Was there anything more you guys needed? No? That's all good? I mean, I'm really stoked you guys are doing this. Like, it's really cool that a local place like this is getting highlighted, Game Gate. Yes, that's the name. Make sure you get that. I hope we see a lot more business. I hope, maybe some new players come in. I can say hi, stuff like that. What's like what's the overall thing you guys are going for? Because I know it's not just you wanted to show sort of a local game shop running games, right? There's something more to it, right? Okay, like Dungeons and Dragons in general, like the culture of people who run games, stuff like that. What it means to people. I mean, that all sounds amazing. Like I don't mean to I definitely do other things, but I really do enjoy Dungeons and Dragons, and I know Jason's gonna be absolutely thrilled to have some people coming in and getting the shop more business. I don't know if I should say this, but I think they're kind of struggling. The store is doing amazing. Back when I first told Liv, that's Olivia, my ex wife, back when I first told her that I wanted to retire early and start a game store, oh, you should have seen the look on her face. She started talking all about how am I going to support myself? How am I going to support our daughter, Sarah? Sarah's wonderful. She's been a huge trooper about this the whole time. Not that there's anything to be a trooper about. I mean, things have been wonderful, amazing. Sometimes there are some gaps in the inventory. Sometimes the cash flow's a little bit tight. You had to take out a few loans every once in a while, but we always pay them back. And this D&D stuff. Back when I was getting into games, when I was doing tabletop, the D&D guys, we always thought they were the nerds, but it is huge now. I mean, I still really don't get it, let's go all this theater crap that they throw in there, all this, playing a character instead of just getting in there and killing some monsters or exploring a dungeon or whatever. I get that, sort of, but then there's all this amateur hour acting. I mean, I get that they have fun with it, but, I mean, thank goodness for my guys. Without Daniel and Jace and Sarah, I wouldn't know anything about what to stock for the D&D people, and it's not exactly lucrative compared to some of the other stuff we sell, but oh my god, it gets so many people in the door, really brings people in to play games, and then maybe consider picking up something that's a little more hardcore, stuff with all the boards and the terrain and the armies of minis. Stuff that you can really feel and smell and touch with your hands, not all this theater of the mind or whatever they call it stuff. You know, I definitely appreciate what they bring in, but in terms of just what I, prefer, let me hang out with the Warhammer guys anyway. Dang, that's where the money is. Every once in a while, I think maybe I should bring my old Tau army out of retirement, really, kick some Heine in there. But, Heine, but, there's a joke in there somewhere. But no, I definitely appreciate what the D&D guys do for us. My name? Oh, well, I'm Jason. Like I said, 5 years ago, maybe I didn't say the time, around 5 years ago, things with the wife not going so well, job I didn't really enjoy. I really took a long look at myself, and I was thinking, what can I do? What's next for good old Jason, And then I remembered how much I used to love just sitting around a table and playing a game with my friends. And I thought, man, I want to do something with that. And then, an opportunity came up, a vacant storefront here that was up for sale or rent, or, I wasn't paying too much attention to the details at the time. I was just like, yep, that's it. So I got it started. Things were tense for a while. Things have been tense since then, too. But overall, everything's been going great. Like, I'm sure the guys will tell you, everything's great. And I don't know, like I said, I don't really get the whole D&D thing, but you really picked a winner here. I mean, those two are characters, let me tell you. So, what now? I've done the intro, then you just ask me a couple of questions and we're done? Alright, I mean, it's your podcast, I guess. How to explain my DMing style? Well, as I said before in the little intro segment, what I do is not just run a game. I'm not just a referee, not just an arbiter of rules, so to speak. I'm a storyteller. I create an experience for the players that they, my captive audience, my tragic heroes, my fans, let's say, they experience the world I create, follow the path of the story as I lay it down, and in doing so, they have a transformative experience that will stay with them for the rest of their lives. And I make absolutely certain of that. I don't pull any punches. I've lost friends over this game. I've gotten hit before. I consider it a personal failure, an insult even, if a month goes by without any of my players crying at the table. That's how intense it is. A heartbreaking story full of pathos and heroism and redemption and revenge. Intense combats that put players on the edge of their seat, that end in a near TPK almost every single combat before I pull it back and save them. I am giving my players the adventure of a lifetime, and they inspire me. They are my muse. They are what this is all for, and together we create something downright magical. And this is all done through the medium of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the world's greatest role-playing game. It's got swords, it's got sorcery, it's got monsters and artifacts teeming with fascinating fantasy world building and history. The history of many, many editions that have continued to refine on the mechanics, and the setting built around them in such a way that there are little brilliant bits of cosmology and metaphysics and mythology all seeded throughout the game like tiny little Easter eggs that perfectly enrich the wider setting of the Forgotten Realms, but are still just vague enough that you can plug them into pretty much any fantasy setting and have yourself a truly elevated fantasy world, or even forego them entirely and still have a very strong basis of mechanics to build out your own world, completely your own world with. Removing those extra bit of lore never ends up breaking anything. In general, the system has the perfect balance of simplicity versus complexity, of details versus open-endedness. You can have monsters that all have, well, not all, but most of them have truly unique abilities, and yet they're not massive walls of text that you have to pore over to get anything out of, like some of the older editions. With just a few simple changes, say a different subclass or a different spell list, you can create an entirely unique character out of the same class as one you've played before, and you only have to make a few decisions to get to that point. You only have to change a few details, and suddenly there's a whole new world open out before you.
And speaking of spells, there are so many fascinating spells. You can turn yourself invisible. You can create a clone of yourself that takes a place of you in the event of your death. You can manipulate and change the minds of surrounding NPCs in about 1,000 different ways, and you can, with a single spell, change the entirety of how reality functions. Not only that, but all of these amazing fantasy elements, all of these amazing concepts and mechanics would perfectly fine if you put them in, say, a sci-fi setting. Let me let you in on a little something. Any of those great spells can just as easily be a gun. Well, some kind of technological MacGuffin. You don't really turn yourself invisible with a gun, but you get the idea. It can all just as easily be sci-fi, and you barely have to change anything. Sure, some people have complaints about the system, like, some of the martial classes are a little less interesting than the magic focused ones. Some of the rules can get vague or, frankly, pretty much non existent in the case of, you know, how exactly long, to use game terminology, bonus action versus seconds, blah blah blah, it takes to switch weapons or equip a weapon or stuff like that. Details like that seem frankly absent, even though they're sometimes referenced in feats and things. But personally, I don't see why it doesn't make perfect sense that a less magical class is going to be less interesting. They don't have magic. That's like the whole point. If you wanted to play a cool class, you should have incorporated magic into the uh, character build at some point. There are a bunch of different ways to do that. If you want something simple, that's maybe a little more boring, that's what the martial classes are for. That's a feature, not a flaw. Same with the open endedness of a lot of the rules. By allowing DMs to pick themselves how long it takes to switch a weapon or something like that, the game, in a lot of ways, is in the hands of the dungeon master and creates a truly unique experience that can work for that table without having a bunch of ancillary rules that you have to change as a result of deciding the way you want things to be. The rules themselves are subject to change at any point. The system is designed with more than enough leeway that you can really homebrew it. To explain that, that's sort of like changing it to have, different settings, different mechanics that suit a table more, things like that. You can change it in pretty much any way you want, and it still works. Of course, for my style at least, I still believe that having consistent rules is important for the world that you're going to create, for the story that you're going to create. But these rules, just have to be consistent with themselves, not what other people, even the people who have made the game, have written. Granted, I haven't had that much exposure to other systems, to other RPGs. But whenever I've tried to run or play one for a session, I mean, it's just obvious how much better 5e is at practically anything they could do. I've never tried to change the way I run things either. Granted, whenever we pick up a new player that sort of just wandered into the shop on a game day and wanted to try for a few sessions or whatever, they always quit. But I have 4 consistent players who will drive through a flood to get to one of my games, and they were handpicked by me. They've gone through every possible trial, shared the highs and lows of an incredible ongoing story with me and the other players, and honestly, I don't think I want anyone else. What we have is perfect already. There's no need to change any of it. And that about covers how I do things. Well, for my DMing style, a GMing style, because, I don't do just D&D. Uh, I've tried out a bunch of different games, different systems, sometimes things that I wouldn't even necessarily call RPGs per se, but still require one player out of the rest of them running the show. And doing all of that, there's something that I've learned over time. Players always want me to come back to D&D. They like their D&D. It's nice, it's familiar. But if I'll let you in, that doesn't bother me because, and I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. They're actually kind of all the same. You know, when you've got a game like this, really what you're doing is playing make believe with a couple extra rules. And we've all been doing that since we were kids, and we didn't need any rules back then. We don't really need any now either. So whatever the setting is, whatever the system is, sometimes even, whatever characters the players pick, ultimately all you gotta do is put together something fun. Have a few monsters running around for them to kill. Nothing too hard. If things start to go poorly, you can mess around with the rules a little, re-roll a couple times when you don't, strictly speaking, need to. You never want anybody to die, that's just no fun. Right? People don't really want hard fights. Some of them do, but the ones that hard fights will settle for fun fights. The ones that just want fun fights, well, they're not gonna like hard ones. So all you gotta do is, make sure their numbers go big, make sure the enemies do a lot of fun, zany things, maybe throw in a little bit of tension if you're feeling pressed, but in the end, the good guys win, the bad guys lose, and that's that. Couple together a couple of fun combats like that, a nice basic story that anyone can get into, and whenever you got new players jumping in, they can just, start figuring everything out right off the bat. There's an evil dragon, there's a princess that needs saving, a dark magician has stolen an important artifact. Silly stuff like that. Just something that everybody can get along with, everybody can instantly recognize and know what their place in is, and can just follow along and have fun, or go off the rails entirely. Like some of the funnest sessions are when the players decide to just start a business, or find a way to sue the quote-unquote big bad evil guy. That's like the main bad guy of the campaign, if there is one, and find a way to sue them instead of actually fighting them. Exploring an unmapped area of the map, and then I can just make up a fun monster for them to find, or a magic crystal or something. It's all improv, it's all make-believe, it's all bouncing ideas off each other in a fun fantasy world and seeing what happens, Spice things up with a couple of funny, friendly NPCs. All the classics, the shopkeeper that looks exactly the same, yet somehow is always in whatever town that the players are gonna approach, the friendly old man that's actually a trickster god in disguise, the talking animals, the child that tags along with the party for them to adopt, a random, scarred mercenary who's secretly a motherly figure with a heart of gold that always gets exasperated at the party's antics. Classic stuff. I always find having a DNPC tag along with the party, that's a dungeon master player character who's sort of just like a party member that's part of the party but less important and controlled by the DM. And they can step in whenever things get too stale or the players don't need to know what to do next, and they can just guide them along or help them out in fights, or just do generally silly things or answer the players' questions to make sure that everybody has a good time. Right, no puzzles, definitely no puzzles. With puzzles, you got maybe one member of the party trying earnestly to do it, and then everybody else is bored, and it just never works out. You don't bother with puzzles. Another thing to watch out for is, especially since I'll admit most of my campaigns don't really get that high up in the levels before we start on a new one, something to really watch out for is CR2. CR stands for challenge rating, and that tells you how difficult a monster is. For CR2 would be about a single one of those guys would be maybe a decent challenge for a party of level 2 adventurers is about what that means. And the funny thing about CR2 is honestly most of the creatures in there are probably harder than CR3 is. You've got half of them that are supposed to not look like monsters at all. You got invisible cubes of acidic jelly. You got flying swords that just look like swords on the ground that are practically impossible to hit. You got mimics, you got evil carpets. You've got these things that can replace someone's brain and kill that character instantly and then control them. You've got hags that can do something kind of similar where they just knock someone out, maybe even kill them. I can't quite remember. CR2 is it's a bit of a mess, so careful around CR2. Never do puzzles. Throw in fun NPCs and easy fun combats for new players who don't really know what they're doing to join in at any time. Same with the story, something nice and approachable and simple that someone just jumping in that day can instantly get the gist of. Really, what you want is a fun, friendly, loose time full of zany hijinks and fun monster slaying and improv and exploration. Just all the good, fun feelings you get from an adventure or a video game, though I don't really play those that often. And just put it all together, mash it up, blend it, and let the people have fun. That's what people really want from a game like this. Sure, the lack of seriousness or gravity about the campaign means I've got a lot of players that come and go, but we've always got enough to run a game at the end of the day. Sometimes a bit too many join in, and I'll suddenly have like 11 players for a session. That gets a little hairy. But overall, even with people jumping in and out, and the lack of warning when people don't show up, and sometimes people having trouble really considering the other players or taking things seriously enough, because even with a fun game like the kind I like to run, you gotta take things a little bit seriously or nothing really happens. Even with all that, we get by, and generally we have a great time. So yeah, that's the kind of game that I like to run. What do I think about the way Daniel runs his games? Well, I don't think those games are the kind that you really think about at all, or during. And I'm sure that's fine if you enjoy running games for kids, if you like babysitting them and just letting them get away with whatever they want for a few hours while their parents do something more important. If you like getting steamrolled by a bunch of min-maxers. If you want games filled with characters named things like Ligma, or just carbon copies of whatever book or movie the player has last engaged with no rules or stakes or gravity, just mindless playtime, then I suppose that sort of game might be something you'd be interested in, but personally I am not. Beyond the kind of game he runs, I think he lacks skill adds the social aspects of being a GM as well. He doesn't seem to ever eject players properly, even when they're being a problem. The store owner, Jason, I believe his name is, has even had to step in and eject players from Daniel's games himself. I have literally been punched in the face for kicking a player from the table after so much as one off-color joke. And yet one of Daniel's players can actively start screaming, and he doesn't seem to have any sort of problem with it. No matter how much the other players seem to be perturbed by it. Yes, I don't really like to think of Daniel's games, or really Daniel at all, in fact. Frankly, I'm pretty sure he's a bigot. Jace? Well, I've definitely seen some of his games before. He's got some consistent players that always seem really, really into it. He does really good narration, he's great with voices. It seems like they're really just sucked into his world whenever he starts talking. He has a lot of dangers and risks and potential death, even, during his combats, which there's something to be said for, I guess, but it does kind of seem like whenever things are going rough, someone just comes in at the last second and saves the day, and all that danger sort of just gets hand-waved away. I don't really know how much he thinks through his encounter designs. Kind of seems like he just goes for something he thinks will be really scary and tough, and then things, quote unquote, work out anyway. I've tried to follow, sort of the way things are going in campaign, like in his campaign, how the story is, but it's apparently been going on for years, and honestly, I think the players don't even understand what's going on half the time. They look confused. They sort of look at these scribbles they have that I think are supposed to be notes, but they don't really say anything. Like, there are these huge emotional moments, don't get me wrong. Like, they all seem ecstatic when they defeat a bad guy who's done something particularly heinous to someone their characters knows, which happens maybe a little too often for my comfort. They even, and this I really don't understand. Like, they even sometimes just start crying when they finish an arc, I think he calls them. Like, everyone gets super emotional, and I they're clearly really invested, but I just don't see how that could be something that someone would want to do. It does not look like fun to me. Sometimes their character dies, in a combat, and they start getting teary eyed then too. I mean, they're cool with it, I think, but I just don't see how any of that's a fun time. And well, the way that some of his players dress sometimes, I mean, really, it's none of my business, but I know people are supposed to have different ways that they dress than how you think they would based on how they look. And that's all up to them. Obviously, it's people can dress however they want, people can be whoever they want to be. It's not really any of my business, but one of them wears these cat ears, like a headband with cat ears on them, every time he comes in, and sometimes, well, I think I don't want to. I don't want to be rude here. I haven't talked to them personally, and they sometimes meow. I'm just saying, if they were my kid, I would be a little concerned. Like, I know there's a lot of science now about um the way people should be called and the way they dress, and whether they're a man or a woman, even regardless of how they look, and that's all good. But I've tried to look it up, and I'm not really seeing a lot of doctors or anything talking about people being animals so much. That's me. I find it a little distracting. I suppose it's none of my business still, but I worry about them sometimes. I mean, we definitely have our differences, but I can very much appreciate aspects of the way that Jace runs his games. In particular, I sometimes have a bit of trouble with conflict resolution. Jace is maybe sometimes a bit trigger happy on making people leave his table. Like, I've seen people kicked for chewing too loudly. I've seen him do a lot of things, but he really does stick up for his players. Like, one time, I think, yeah, someone actually hit him full on in the face. Like, there was this one person, I hadn't seen him around a lot. He started saying some inappropriate, I feel like, maybe borderline, maybe no, it was definitely inappropriate. I don't know what I would have done if it had happened at my table, but he was saying some things to one of uh Jace's players, who was okay, yes, she goes by she, her, that's what it is, right? And this guy was saying some things he definitely, I mean, I'm very certain she's also just, like, not fully, but she's always been a woman, I think. And I also know that she uses she. And this guy was saying some things, and Jace got right up on his face, and then I didn't quite see what happened, but there was a lot of shock, there was gasping. Eventually, Jason rushes this guy out of the store, and the next time, the game ends early. And the next time I see Jace, he comes in with a black eye. So I mean, I respect him a lot for that. I wish I could be that. I could be that uh, good at protecting the people I care about. That's sometimes confrontation is really something I'm not the best with, but yeah, no, I respect him a lot. It's just we definitely have our differences. So yeah, the boys, they're both incredible characters, like I was saying. Daniel, Jace, I remember when Daniel first came here, back when we were opening. He was actually our first customer, I think. Before we had even opened, he was waiting outside. I don't know how he found out about the place. But he was standing there, his eyes were shining. I think his cheeks were even red a little. He was super polite to me and my daughter Sarah. He had brought all this stuff and he was talking about doing some games in the store. And I really didn't get it, but Sarah said it sounded good, so I just went along with it. And since then, he's brought in so many people. Every time he runs a game in the shop, the kids are watching, the adults are watching, people just sort of hop in and join in, and he lets them. It's a really wonderful time, it seems like. There's a lot of laughter. Sometimes he sort of hangs around the store a bit much, like he's trying to avoid something back at home. I have a bit of shades of that myself at certain points in my life. Anyway, he's right out front. He's the first person ever in the door, and he just sets out at a table and pulls out this giant bag, and he just dumps it on the table. And there's like a sea of dice. There's no organization. All these different colors. Some of them are metal. Some of them are wood. Got some of them are like plastic or whatever, and they got this stuff inside them, glitter, and he just starts talking about, I ask him why he's got so many, and he talks about like how some are lucky and some are unlucky, and how like you have to put them in dice jail if they roll bad during a session or something like that. Some wild stuff, and he's named each of them. He's given each of these dice. There's got to be like 100 of them in there, and he's given each one of them a name. It's just like a wonderful character. Like I said, he talks pretty well when he's talking about, nerd stuff, pop culture, games, Dungeons and Dragons. But if you try to have a normal conversation with him about anything else, he starts to stutter a little. He has trouble. Has to throw in Star Wars references for some reason. He's a great guy. A little off kilter, but a great guy. And a lot of people, when he's coming in for a day he's gonna run a game, he sometimes brings a bunch of people with him who are new to the store, or people who are already in the store stay longer to check out his games, just watch or join in as a player. So I really appreciate what he does for the place. Anyway, moving on to Jace. I remember when he first came by, it had to be like a year or two in, and he's this older looking teenager, and he comes in and let me see if I can do an impression. He goes, "Greetings, proprietor. Would you be willing to allow me to enter into the sanctuary and begin to tell the tales of old?" Something crazy like that. I just sort of blink at him and say, whatever floats your boat, buddy. And he's been running games here ever since. He doesn't bring in quite as many people. Anyone that, it seems like the people that join his games that weren't there already kind of don't end up sticking around or anything. But the ones he's had the whole time. When he first showed up, he brought them all with him. They were like, there was this silent mob of other older teenagers just standing behind him, and they just, not really a mob, like 4 of them, but they just started buying things out of the store, and they've been doing that too ever since. They show up when he does, they always play when he runs a game, and they definitely spend some money on the store. A lot more than Daniel's players a lot of the time, if I have to make a direct comparison here. So he doesn't have as many, but they certainly contribute to the profits. Something about a black eye? Oh yeah, that was a little strange. One time, I think he was still pretty young at this point, but there was some guy doing some things, saying some stuff. I didn't really catch all of it. about one of his players, and he just rightfully he blew up at the guy. Got all up in his face, told him he had to leave. There was I think the guy slapped him. It wasn't really a slap. It was kind of more limp wristed, like a really more of a tap on a face than anything. But that was totally, totally beyond the pale anyway. And I made sure he got out of there. The game wraps up pretty quick. Jace seems fine. The rest of his players seem fine, but they aren't interested in playing for the rest of the day. They decide to reschedule it, coming back in the next day. And when they do, Jace comes in and he's got like this big purple splotch over his right eye, and I think he painted it on with eyeshadow. I mean, it wasn't fooling anyone, and nobody he was with seemed to mind, so I just let it go. But like I said, they're both real characters. Anyway, things have been going pretty good at the old storefront lately. I mean, we could always afford to be making more money, afford. It's losing money you can't afford to do, not making it. But, things are going pretty good. Still, sometimes I want to, just shake things up a little, have a little bit of fun, liven the place up a little. And I heard about this thing. Like I said, I'm not really into the D&D space or whatever, but I heard about this thing that sounds kind of fun. It's called co-DMing or something. I'm thinking maybe we should have them run a joint campaign, see what happens. Jason said something he wanted to talk about. Look, if this is about the black eye thing, no one was supposed to think that was real. I was way younger, and I saw what was happening at the table. I'd seen the harassment. I wanted to, as sort of solidarity, highlight the, presence of domestic abuse for families everywhere, all around us, and the harmful effects harassment could have. Everyone else at the table told me that was maybe a bad idea. It was a bit much. I've never done anything like that since. It was a mistake. They still make fun of me for it. It was not supposed to look real. What, co? Oh no. No, that wasn't real. It totally fooled me. I mean, I look. I don't know why he did that, but he did a good job. But totally thought it was a black eye there. Oh, Jason wants us to try co-DMing. Well, I mean, we definitely don't do things the same way at all. Oh my goodness, that's ridiculous. There's no way I would ever do that. That would be a disaster. I refuse. That is insane. He's lost his mind. I mean, like I said, we've got our differences, but I have a lot of respect for the way Jace does things. I think he's a very good DM. I think he cares a lot about his players, at least the ones he knows. I think maybe, just maybe, we could try it. See how it goes. You're seriously asking me if I'm looking forward to this. You're asking me if this is something I think should happen. You think I want to do something like this? Well, I mean, I'll be honest, it's probably not gonna work, but, yeah. Do I want to do it?
Over
Sure.
my
Sounds
dead
like fun.
body.